So for what seemed like 1,000 years ago, we got reaction figures. Started off with the unreleased Alien Kenner action figures, which were kind of a novelty. The long and the short of it is, they developed a toy line and then suddenly realized this ain't a kids movie and backed off from it. And so the Kenner figures kind of went into obscurity, a little bit of a legend, perhaps, and then Reaction just said, "Hey, and all this grabbing up stuff, let's make these, and this will be fun." And it was. There was a novelty to it, as I said. And after a bit, they started putting out more and more. There were a lot of properties that they touched on. It is Star Trek, which I suppose kind of made sense because Star Trek was just before Star Wars, and if they had figures in this scale, they would have been that little 5 POA. The motion picture versions were. And then it kind of went to an O-ring style with Star Trek 3, and then just kind of didn't do anything after that until at least Next Generation came up, and then Playmates started doing their not quite whatever that scale was. Moving on into the future, they also did Firefly, which had a good novelty to it because there was no Firefly action figures at that point. So you had a ravenous fan base hungry for anything. So smart move there. And they were still kind of fun. They hung around the $7.99 mark and then went up to $10 and it started getting less fun. And somehow I missed when these things jumped to $20. But after going to $20, not only were they in Targets, but they also acquired the G.I. Joe license to do anything cartoon related, which was weird. What's weird about that is Joe never fit this kind of aesthetic. They were never designed this way. They were never intended to design this way. And I know a lot of companies started doing this retro thing that seemed to catch on in some areas. I can see it with Star Wars. And I can see it with like wrestling. But when you start doing everything in a retro style, it kind of defeats the purpose. And that is almost like, seems to be what Super 7 survives on. But there's no way I was paying $20 for a 5 POA figure. And BBTS had them for $5. That seems about right. I'll take a look, because I've never taken these. I would just see them clogging the shelves and not doing much of anything. And plus, it was an aesthetic I wasn't really fond of. I mean, I like the vintage Star Wars figures I have. Those are all from my childhood. I have no desire to fill gaps in that collection, nor replace some of the ones that are of lesser quality. I mean, it's... time has come and gone. It's nice to remember. And I know there's a big controversy with people doing repros and customs and doing figures in that style. I say if people enjoy it, just enjoy it. It's not for me, and that's fine. I mean, I can admire the workmanship. I can look at the product and go, well, nice, and move on and not freak out about it. But with this is something different. This was something I didn't understand because it seems to be something mass produced, but at a more boutique level price point, which I don't get. Because if Stan Solo can produce, and I pick him out of the many people who do this, just because he's one of the best known ones. But if Stan Solo can produce 5 POA figures for roughly the same price, why is this company producing them at such greater quantity at the same price? I think if these hung around $10, they'd probably sell a lot better. I decided, though, if I'm going to look at them, I'm going to buy a couple of Cobra troops that at the worst case scenario, I can have hanging in the background of a scene, and it's not going to be that jarring they'll be out of sight, you know. So I bought 2 Cobra Troopers. So I will say, in the packaging, it does look nice. It's a nice presentation, and I could see an argument for people talking more about the card and the packaging than about the figure itself. That I could see. I think that falls weak pretty quickly, but I can at least understand the argument. That back is done up just like old style, and they even have a file card. Yeah, no, it's not quite as intricate as the original file cards, but it's a file card, and it's not written in 27 languages with one line. So at least that's there. Now, getting them out of the package, boy, are they they are really they're rubber band in, so it took a little work to get them out. I would think that would be dangerous because with the soft plastic the way it is, I would be worried that it would cause damage to the figure. If I collected this line long term and many more, I get why they did it. They want them to hold them in place, but it doesn't seem like a smart move on to me. So, scale wise, these guys, I mean, they kind of fit in. I mean, look, areas with Indy. Now, Indy, keep in mind, Indy's not got the best stance, but they kind of fit in with Indy. They kind of fit in with, you know, Strike Force Alpha, which is basically a O-ring G.I. Joe. Of course, you know, when you get an anniversary, you get into the height issue. And, you know, I mean, they kind of blend. They're not perfect. You could squeeze them in. Now, of course, there's not a whole lot to talk about in articulation here, and there's really not a lot to talk about in accessories. All they got is a gun. So there's really not much you can do with these guys. I mean, they're not going to pose in any dynamic way in any action scene besides holding their guns out like a Star Wars figure would. And that's really all you got. I mean, there is some detailing here, but it's not massive, and it's really nothing to write home about or to worry about. It's not anything to talk about. It's not there. I will say the plastics do feel cheap. And it was funny, the first time I bent the joints, I heard a snap, and it was like that scary snap that, if you ever remember the old school buying of Star Wars and Star Wars type products, you try to, if you were not careful, you would try to move the joint the first time, and you'd hear the snap and suddenly realize, oh, Starbucks arm came off. You know, that happened. It happened a lot with the Battlestar Galactica line. My Starbucks had that problem. I knew another guy who had another figure. I can't remember which one. I want to say Adama had that problem. Yeah. But yeah, it was that same sound, and it was like, wow. I realized how ingrained that was into my psyche at this point. They can't really sit in many vehicles, maybe a vamp, but they're definitely not going to sit in anything that requires a figure to bend their knee, since they have no bend at the knees. So yeah, I mean, they can be in the background. They can stand there. They can be a prisoner. That's always a good thing, right? I mean, because if you think about it, it seemed like every time you had a Cobra in jail, they just kind of stood there. There was nothing you could really do with them. So I mean, this they would fit in that respect as well. But no, there's not much here, and I think honestly, a lot of people say that at 1/18 the scale is dead, and I think the reaction line is why they think that, because there's nothing here to work with. You can't get in any poses at all. They just hold their one weapon okay. I mean, the weapon looks good. There's at least that much. But beyond that, there's nothing there. Now, they supposedly are going to be doing O-rings, supposedly, at the same price point. I'm just kind of like, well, what are they going to have? And will we care? And I suppose the real thing is you just got to wait and see. But if it's this kind of quality, I'm probably not going to be too impressed. I mean, again, this plastic is just, it's just not it's not durable, you can tell. I mean, this is not going to last. This is not something you would give a kid either. I mean, this is at best a display model. But you know, giving it to a kid, it's going to get broke. So you kind of want to avoid that. What do I think about these? They're just there. I mean, they're not bad. I mean, for what they are overpriced. But they're not good either. I mean, again, there's no super detail. I mean, the paint's pretty good. But let's face it, there's not much paint on a Cobra Trooper. I mean, it's just blue. So, I mean, I guess it would have been really easy to slop it up. But at least on these, they weren't slopped. So, I don't know. I've heard stories of paint slops on other figures. Well, yeah, I can see that. But at least these aren't. This is not a line I'm going to continue with. It's, tip one toe into and go, nah, not for me. And take my foot right back out. So that's pretty much where I stand right now is on this. Just looking at this going, okay, why does this exist? And should it? I am surprised this has continued as far as it has. I've not seen too many people pick these up and do videos on them. And really, the reason being is because there's nothing you can do. They just kind of stand there. And that's all. So I can see why. But, I mean, if you enjoy them, I mean, maybe you enjoy them in the box. That's the one thing I give it to them. Maybe that's it. I don't understand them. I've never understood people's love of these retro lines. Especially with figures that were actually a step above that. I mean, the 5 POA were great for their time. But, at the same time, there's no reason to go back. And I'm wondering if maybe, some people are saying that about O-rings now with the O-ring resurgence. Maybe there's a point there. But at least, with the O-ring resurgence, we're getting some steps forward. Not so with this. This is just a simple step back, and that's really kind of where I'm bothered by it. Just like I was with all the other reaction figures I've ever bought. So that that really settles it right there. I mean, that's my issues with reaction. Just the same old, same old. And some people are going to crap on me, and some Super 7 fanboys are going to run and save Super 7. But the point is, the toys is where the talk is. And there's not a lot to talk about here. So there we are. Thank you for watching Tipping the Scales. Don't forget, do all that YouTube stuff later.